When you take a general chemistry class, you often have to memorize some of the common polyatomic ions. So let's go through a list of some of the ones that you might see in your class. So we'll start off with cation here, so a positively charged ion. NH4 plus is called the ammonium ion. And for anions, there are many anions that you should know. CH3COO minus is the acetate anion. Cn minus is the cyanide ion. OH minus is the hydroxide anion. MnO4 minus is the permanganate ion. And when you get to NO3 minus versus NO2 minus, look at the endings. So NO3 minus is nitrate, right? So we have an ATE suffix, an ate suffix here, which means more oxygens, versus the ite suffix, which means fewer oxygens. So we can see that nitrate has 3 oxygens and nitrite has 2 oxygens. And that ending is important because it's going to help you with some of the other polyatomic ions. For example, let's look at this next set here of 4. And let's look at chlorate, right? So chlorate has 3 oxygens. It's ClO3 minus 1. And chlorite has fewer oxygens. It has 2 oxygens here, ClO2 minus. So we have 8 meaning more and ite meaning fewer here. What about perchlorate, right? So here we have chlorate, but we've added on a prefix this time, and the prefix per means 1 more oxygen. So perchlorate means 1 more oxygen than chlorate. Chlorate had 3 oxygens, right? And for perchlorate, we add 1 on and we get 4. So perchlorate is ClO4 minus. Next, let's look at hypochlorite. So we talked about chlorite up here. So here's chlorite, and then we put a prefix hypo in front of it. Hypo means 1 fewer. So if we look at chlorite, we had 2 oxygens, right? We take 1 away, and now we have only 1 oxygen, and so that must be the hypochlorite ion. You could have done this for a different halogen. Here we're dealing with chlorine, right? But let's say instead of ClO3 minus, let's do BrO3 minus. ClO3 minus was chlorate. Here we have bromine instead of chlorine, so this would be bromate, right? So there's another polyatomic ion. And we could do another example. So instead of ClO minus, which is hypochlorite, we could have had BrO minus, which would therefore be hypobromite, right? So this would be hypobromite. All right, let's look at our next set of polyatomic ions. All right, so let's get some space down here. So we have SO4 2 minus is called sulfate, right? So we have our 8 ending, and then we have 4 oxygens. So if we go to 3 oxygens, SO3 2 minus, this is sulfite, right? Because ite means fewer oxygens. What about if we took sulfate, SO4 2 minus, and we added on an H plus? Right, so H plus and SO4 2 minus should give us HSO4, and then instead of a -2 here, instead of a 2 minus, we would just have a 1 minus because we added on a positive charge. Right, so 1 positive charge and 2 negative charges give us 1 negative charge. So HSO4 minus is called the hydrogen sulfate ion. All right, you might also hear bisulfate for this one. Next, CO3 2 minus is called carbonate. So if we add on an H plus to CO3 2 minus, we'd get HCO3, and then we go from -2 or 2 minus to -1 because we're adding on a positive charge here. So HCO3 minus is called hydrogen carbonate, and you'll also hear bicarbonate a lot. Next, we have PO4 3 minus, which is called phosphate. If we add on an H plus to phosphate, right, think about what we would get. We would get HPO4, and then instead of 3 minus, right, we're adding on a positive charge, so we get 2 minus. So we call this hydrogen phosphate. All right, let's add on a proton to hydrogen phosphate. So we're adding an H plus onto hydrogen phosphate. That would give us 2 H's. Right, PO4, and we'd go from 2 minus down to 1 minus. So H2PO4 minus is called dihydrogen phosphate. All right, let's continue on. One more set of polyatomic ions to know. So we have CrO4 2 minus, which is called chromate. And if we have two chromiums, so Cr2O7 2-, this is called dichromate. Next, C2O4 2- is called the oxalate ion. And we have O2 2- is called peroxide. And here we have SCN-, which we call thiocyanate. So thio, think about sulfur if you see thio there. So for our next one, right, we have sulfur present again. It's S2O3 2-, and this one's called thiosulfate. So you might see a few additional polyatomic ions in your class, but these are the ones that you see most frequently. So make sure to memorize your polyatomic ions.